What up, Hyperchange? Welcome to another episode. Today we've got a really special guest, Detroit industry legend, Sandy Munro on the line. Sandy, welcome to Hyperchange.
Well, thank you again. Yes, thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so I found out about you and what you do about maybe a year and a half ago, and you're basically in the business of tearing down cars and selling reports and that data and information to other car companies. And I think you work with a ton of different people in the industry, also defense contractors. And I even ended up going to Detroit about 6 months ago to your electric vehicle day, where you presented all the electric vehicles you tore down, how those were differently built. Just unbelievable, like top quality research about how the auto industry and just what's under the hood of these cars. So I'm curious, like, how did you get started into the business of tearing down cars and selling reports on that?
Well, so I started off in the tool making industry, and then I went into machine tools and automation. That's where they convinced me to get out of tool making and get into engineering. And then I wound up as chief engineer, and then I went to Ford. And when I went to Ford, there was very, very little that related to the industry I came from. I came from an industry where everything was measured in thousandths of an inch. And I came unprepared for what I saw when I got into the auto industry. And I could see that there was lots of opportunities for the product as long as it was redesigned differently. Like everybody wanted to go to robots and whatnot. And I came from that industry. I knew exactly what you had to do in order to make it happen. So I got very lucky. There was Ford hires in 40-year blocks. So I was 29, and the next youngest guy in my office was probably 70, maybe 75. I don't know. But they had 80-year-old guys in the office, so they weren't doing too much walking around in the factory. And so I got the chance to basically do whatever I wanted, and it was easy for me to get promoted a couple of times.
Those guys were leftovers from the Model T program, huh?
Yeah. Hey, you know what? One of the pieces of machine tools that we had when I was at Ford, when I first went there, we had to change the roller shafts. Okay, it was just rollers and power-free rollers, and so I went to try and find the drawing, and there's a little note that said, use the shaft out of Model T Magneto, blah, blah. Magneto? Who the hell? What am I looking at? I mean, I had no clue what I was going to be doing here, because these little shafts, I mean, who makes these things anywhere? You're going to go and buy a Model T and pull the Magneto shaft out. So anyway, that's kind of gives you a little bit of history there. But anyway, I was lucky enough to be at Engine Division when they needed somebody like this, and one thing led to another, and when I was at Engine Division, I knew quite a bit about engines, and so I started suggesting redesigns. Well, if you're in manufacturing and you make redesign suggestions to product design engineers, they're poo-pooed immediately. One thing led to another, though, and I made a couple of suggestions that made a lot of sense, at least to the vice president at the time. His name was Max Jarosik, really a fabulously smart guy. Anyways, he decided to take me under his wing, and next thing I knew, I was working both in manufacturing and product design at the same time, and that meant that I had to know more about what was up and coming on these different engines, and we started taking them to pieces. Now, we did have a benchmarking operation, but it didn't do what we needed it to do. It just had a bunch of parts laying on a table. We wanted to find out where's the money, what's good, what's bad, those kinds of things, and so consequently, we started taking apart our own engines at Ford. And then we got very successful. I developed a little program, and I used another program that was from like an open source. And this is a time when everybody was using the very first computers. So these computers were incredibly heavy, loggables, we called them. And I bought my own. I could have bought a car for the same price as what I paid for this thing, because Ford wouldn't buy these kinds of that type of equipment. So I bought the first alleged portable computer. In fact, I'll take a picture and I'll send it to you for grins and giggles.
Awesome.
You can have a look, but because we've still got it here. Anyway, that basically allowed me to in a computer program, which had a lot more validity than just me talking, to hand out a business case and say, well, this won't work, and it's going to cost us a lot of money, and this is a no build, and this is what's going to cost us, and this is a poor quality idea, and this is what it's going to cost us. And I handed it back, and the product design engineers didn't have a chance. I mean, I think doesn't really work well when you're talking to the finance guys. They don't like to hear that kind of stuff. So we had a lot of success on something called the Vulcan V6. It came out as a much cheaper engine than anything we'd ever done before. It hit the ground running with quality. The machine tools it took to put it together were cheaper. Everything was wonderful. And so I got promoted a couple of times, and I wound up in finance staff, actually at world headquarters. And so now I wasn't really engaged in a lot of the stuff that I used to do. And I found out that when you get to world headquarters, it's very political, and I'm not a political kind of guy. So Dr. Deming recommended that I leave. He suggested that right in front of the guy who was the president of Ford at the time, Red Poling. And so I thought, well, I guess my career is over. So that's how I kind of got into business. And I started small, and I didn't start in the auto industry. I started working on, actually my first customer was FMC. So that's Farm Machinery Corporation. And they took me all over the place, and I found out I could make a lot of money, and it didn't. I had a lot of knowledge that other people could buy, and next thing I know, we had a contract with Ford, and then I had another one with General Motors. Lasted quite a while, and the next thing I knew, we were working for the aircraft industry, and on and on. So now we work on aircraft. We work on white goods like washing machines and hot water heaters and things like that. And we also do automotive, medical devices. I mean, pretty much anything you can think of, from Barbie. Basically, this is the truth, from Barbie to the space station, because I did work on Barbie, and we have worked on the space station. So it's kind of a wide spread of things that we get involved with.
So cool. And so what's your story with Tesla? Because I know you were a little bit of like a skeptic at first, and then...
No, I wasn't.
Oh, you
More
weren't?
than a skeptic. No, I thought, this is crap. This isn't a car. I couldn't, when I got that thing, I thought for sure that's going to be it. My company is over. Because when that car came rolling, well, first off, I didn't want to buy the damn thing. I got sucked in. I mean, Audi, through another consulting house, contacted us and said, here, go get a car, and we'll pay you to disassemble it, and we want a report. And I said, sure, fine. And I told them that the report that they were asking for was worth about $750,000. Everybody was happy. And that was the end of that, right? Well, my car didn't show up right away because the quality was so poor that they stopped it at the factory. By the time it got going, by the time I got the car out, he said, oh, forget it. We put one on an airplane and flew it home. You're not supposed to do that, but they did it anyway. And that's the way it goes. So now I got a car, and what am I going to do with it? And we'd already tried the BMW, and we knew that we're not doing that again. We lost a chunk of change on that. So I dragged the car out, and I don't know if you know John McElroy, but John McElroy said, hey, can I come down and take some pictures? And I said, sure. And he came down, and we did a little interview, and he said, what do you think of this thing? I said, oh, it's a pile of shit. Look at these doors. I mean, you could throw a cat through these cracks. I mean, this is like ridiculous. And then, John that's from the Fit Finish Quality Assessment. So after that, John said, let's take it out and drive it. And I said, sure, why not? And I figured it was going to drive like it looked, but it didn't. And so we got in and we drove around, and he was driving. I hadn't driven the car ever. And he was driving it around. He says, "Hey, this is really peppy. Holds the road really nice. What did you think of it when you drove it?" And I said, "I haven't driven it." But when we got back to the plant, I said goodbye to John, and then they were going to take it back into the, to be for teardown. And I said, "Let me just try this out a bit." So I did. And I used to race cars a long time ago, and this car handled pretty well for an electric car, as it were. Anyway, we got it back, and we stripped off the things that really, like the don't judge a book by its cover. Okay, I was looking at the cover, but once we got past the cover and into the meat of the book, once we started looking at the electronics, the electrics, the motors, the inverter converters and whatnot, we'd already seen a bunch of electric vehicles, but we never saw anything like this. And that's when, and then we started looking at how they did what they did and how much things should cost versus what everybody else was spending. All of a sudden, not all of a sudden, it very slowly changed my mind. And then I've said this a couple of times now, but I've never recommended anybody buy a 3. But I have recommended people buy a Y, because this is the first electric car that I feel is worth buying. So
Yeah, and it's pretty incredible that Tesla gets like 25% gross margins, I think it was in their last quarter for their electric cars.
yeah.
I'm curious what you think the other automakers are making on their electric vehicles, because none of them report their gross margins. But my theory is they're paying so much to outsource the battery, all of the components, electronics, that they're probably losing money on every single electric car, close to that.
Yeah. Our guesstimate is somewhere between, at the low end, 500, and at the high end, probably about, let me think here. I think it was 14,000, depending on which car you're talking about. These things are not profitable because, as I said, in somebody else was interviewing me. I can't remember who, but I said they're not profitable because the car companies aren't serious. They aren't serious about what they want to do, and they're trying the same strategy. So they start out with a sports car or something like that, and that doesn't work really well because you can't make money on them. And then they're late to market. And then there's other guys that are saying, well, we'll just get something into the marketplace, and they put it into the marketplace, and it just doesn't. It's not really an electric car. It's kind of like somebody's impression of how electric car should be. And it's using kludged materials. It's not a car that's been designed to be an electric car. And then it goes on and on, but mostly it's trying to squeeze an old way of doing business into a new product, and you can't do that. It won't work well. You've got to have leadership has got to step up and say, look, no more screwing around. And so consequently, I know who is doing that. The guys that are buying more of our reports than anybody are the Japanese. Almost every OEM, I can't think of one OEM that hasn't bought our reports in Japan. The Chinese buy a lot of our reports. The reports have sold really well in Korea, and a few in Europe, and one in North America. It's the other guys are really, they're serious. They want to know everything they can know about what's going on with Tesla, because they're selling millions of cars and nobody else is selling virtually any. Really, at the end of the day, it comes out as spillage, really.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that, because I saw in another video you were asking what other cars you would think people would want to see you tear down, and I thought the Mirai, the fuel cell car, would be really cool. And also from China, the Neo. I don't know if you've looked much into Neo, because I know they're only selling them in China for now. But there's a lot of interest about those as well.
Well, a Neo, that might be a bit tough for us because we help them. So that we have an operation in China, and we have worked with NIO on some of their
Oh,
stuff. So that might be tough, but we didn't do the whole car. We didn't do an analysis on the whole car. So maybe it's not hard for us to get anything out of China. As a matter of fact, everybody had problems with masks. My Tina Liu, the lady who runs Munro China, she sent us a great big care package with 2,000 masks, KN95 masks. So we can get whatever we want out of China. And a Neo might be, I never thought of that. That's not a bad idea. Yeah,
yeah.
I'll put that on the list. Yeah.
Nice. So, moving to the Cybertruck, I'm curious, what your thoughts are on this because this seems like such a game changer for the auto industry. Like, I think when we look back, 10 to 20 years from now, we're like the Cybertruck's launched, it's in the market, it's going to be such an inflection point, and just it seems like it was almost engineered over designed, and it's so much more about making it functional from, cost, manufacturing standpoint, and design standpoint that nothing like that has ever been done in the auto industry for like decades.
Mm.
So I'm curious, kind of like me in particular, like the manufacturing side of this. Like, this is going to be a totally new way to build a car.
Yeah. That vehicle is I put it in a different classification. People want to call it uh, they want to call it a pickup truck. It's not. It doesn't fall into that class. I think it's a new class, and that's how it's going to be remembered. I believe. I think that, like for instance, when the minivan was actually invented at Ford, I don't know if you knew that or not,
I
but
didn't.
the guy that invented it, Lee Iacocca, did not get along with Henry Ford, and so in Building 5, when I was still at Ford, there was the Chrysler minivan. Only thing was, it was the Ford minivan, and Lee Iacocca had made that thing up, and Henry Ford II decided he didn't want anything to do with it. When that when that minivan came out, I mean, it was instantly the savior of Chrysler. Chrysler was saved by that vehicle, and when it came out, it wasn't a station wagon, it wasn't a van, it was something, but it wasn't, and they called it the minivan, and all of a sudden it took off like a rocket ship. I think that in years to come, the Cybertruck will fall into that same sort of a classification where it doesn't match anything that's out there. It's similar to this and it's similar to that, but it's not the same as anything else. So I think that that's what you're going to find. I think it's going to be an icon like a minivan.
And how are they going to build that thing?
I don't know. I can tell you how I'd build it, but
Yeah, sure.
I don't think that I could be wrong, but I don't think I'm going to be privy to the process sheets associated with that thing. But I know that they were talking about 50,000 vehicles a year. And I think they're grossly underestimating what they could sell. But let's say they sell 50,000 a year. The materials that they're using or talking about using, and the styling on that product is basically a piece of cake. That car or that vehicle is a piece of cake to produce. It's going to be relatively inexpensive as far as tooling is concerned. The car itself is the piece cost is going to be high because stainless steel is expensive, and on and on and on. And those windows, if they want bulletproof windows and whatnot, that's going to be expensive. But I think that there's a market out there, and the marketers they have targeted a market for myself and about 20 guys that I know that go hunting and have quads and have motorcycles and like to go out in the desert if you happen to be in California in the high desert, or if you're around here in Michigan, this is for going into the bush. I mean, everything about this appeals to guys that are I don't know, still what I would classify as sportsmen, people who want to go out and have a small adventure. instead of like for instance, I own a Jeep Rubicon, and I take it off road. Most people that buy a Rubicon, the most aggressive driving they go is like from the house to the drugstore. I mean, that's it. They never take it off road, never. But it's cool to have one, right? I think that there's some people out there that would like to have a Cybertruck for the same reason. But I think that most of the buyers are going to be people like me that are interested in going hunting, taking it off road, using it to haul quads or bikes, and that's kind of like motorcycles. But I think that's what it's going to be. And I can already tell you, if that thing comes out and it's half as, I have 5 of them on, Munro has 5 of them on order. And this time we're not going through a broker because we don't have to. We got in the first hour with 5 of them. My guys were watching the release. I didn't even know what was going on. And they popped in 5 different names and using their home address, their own email address, not Munro and Associates address.
Yeah, I have one on order too. I'm so excited.
Yeah.
So, and I've heard you mention before, or actually one thing I'm curious about the Cybertruck is this exoskeleton. A lot of people have asked me about how that ties into the safety of the vehicle, with like the crumple zone and crashing a different way. Do you have any thoughts on that?
It's no different. I mean, you still have to go through a finite element analysis. So you design a product in CAD, computer-aided design, and you give it the shape you want, and you take a guess at what you want to do with different parts of the vehicle. Then you can go into something that Altair, one of the other CAE computer-aided engineering tools that Altair puts out, and what it'll do is it'll help you by designing it or redesigning what you have, modifying it slightly so that you've got an efficient use of materials and things like that. Then you go into basically crash mode with finite element analysis to find out how that design is going to react in different crash modes. So side impact, small offset, rollover, rear, everything that would tell you you're in trouble and how to make it work. And so what the computer does then, or the computer program, it comes back and says, well, don't do this. You have to strengthen this. This is too red. This needs to be a little more blue. The different colors tell you how much of a crumple you're going to get in different areas. And I don't think there's going to be any problem at all with an exoskeleton or a conventional build. You figure it out the same way. We're going to use the same tool. They're going to use the same tools to design how that product is going to react in a bad situation.
And it seems pretty crazy because Tesla's been leading in safety, and they had the lowest probability of injury, I think, by the National Highway Traffic and Safety Administration. Like, they set new records for their cars. Do you know why they're able to create such safe vehicles and they're like pushing the envelope?
It's way over designed. I mean,
but isn't that a good thing that they're making the cars safer? Like, some would say that's
but the problem is that you're supposed to make money on these things. And sometimes over designing it will give you a great recommendation from the EPA or from NHTSA, but at the end of the day, you still have to make money at it. And so you, every time you add an ounce of weight, you reduce the range. I think Tesla's range could go up a lot if they modified the design of the car. It could still make it exactly the same as Crash, but it doesn't have to be so heavy. And I made mention of that before. And so what did they do? They went in and on the Y, they took out a whole bunch of bits and pieces, hundreds of little bits and pieces in the rear third of the car, and put it in a big casting. And they went from hundreds of parts and who knows how many different kinds of fastening devices to four major parts and basically 30 components, and the rest of them are nuts and bolts. And you know what? Works just fine, and I'm sure it's going to be 10 times stronger, and it's going to be lighter. So it depends on how you design things. You don't want to have anything more than you absolutely need in order to hit the safety requirements that the government's looking for. And all cars are, there's no car that I know of that's in the marketplace right now that's not safe. It's just, how much do you want to spend in order to get to a point of redundancy, like redundant materials, extra materials that don't add any extra to the value to the car. So.
And are there any other improvements now that you've torn down the Model Y that you want to see, like low-hanging fruit that you think Tesla should improve on their next iteration, or any new ideas for Elon?
I think Elon's doing just fine, but I suggested a couple of things, and before when and we sent 250 ideas to the guys at Tesla. I don't know what all they did with them, but we can see that there's improvements here and there where we know that those are kinds of suggestions, whether they came from us or whether their own people did it. I don't care. As long I'm more interested in making sure that the auto industry survives, really and truly. I don't care whether it's Ford or Chrysler or whoever. I want to make sure that the auto industry survives. We have always had these situations where there's been shakeouts where, huge companies vanish overnight. And manufacturing, I think, is necessary for the United States to maintain the standard of living that we've got right now. Stop manufacturing and bad things happen. Lots of people will be on welfare. There's nothing. So I want things to happen. And that's why when we were talking, when we tore the Model Y apart, and I said, well, we're just going to give this stuff away. And we said, wait a minute, we usually sell this. I said, well, we're selling these reports, we're going to give it away. And the reason for that is because the ideas that we sent to Tesla, for us, they were obvious. For them, obviously, it wasn't. And they put them in place. And there's a couple of things. Like the big thing for me, two big things. One, they need to get a grip on the paint.
I was going to ask you about that. I'm glad you're bringing this up.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I'm really disappointed. And now I've seen 3 Tesla Model Ys, and you got the same, now I don't want to say nasty paint job, but I can't think of anything else. That's the biggest thing. It's not a good paint job at all. I don't know why. And I've recommended people that I know, like Mike Tracy. He goes all around the world making paint shops work properly. I'd like to see Elon Musk hire him and get the paint right. I think I don't know how it happened, but I think they're inducing dirt just before they start paint because it's underneath the skin. So, and then it's got orange peel and things like that, and swirl marks. People have been commenting on when I did the ride and drive for a little car, the blue car, I mean. People were saying that you can see the swirl marks. I didn't talk about the paint at all, hardly, but if it shows up on video, that's something you really need to do, and it's not that difficult. I mean, it should be something that they could make right. So that's one thing. The other thing that I have a problem with is...
And actually, on the paint, I thought it was really cool how in the Third Row podcast, actually, that I think you called into, Elon mentioned how in the Berlin factory that they're building, they're going to have a totally new paint shop. And I think a lot of the reason why the paint has been bad is because they bought the Fremont factory. It was an old factory. I think the paint shop was probably old too. And so that's what Elon was saying. It's difficult to upgrade, but their new paint shop in Berlin. So I think that's a cool way that Tesla, they're always improving everything, and every weakness eventually becomes a strength. And so for the Berlin paint shop, they were talking about how it's going to have flop, or Elon, there's some sort of 3D, I didn't know what that was, some paint term. I was Googling it. But it was kind of cool, shiny paint. So I'm curious, what do you think he means when he says this new Tesla paint's gonna pop and have flop?
Yeah, well, the I don't know what flop is, but but newer style paint jobs basically look deep, really deep, and they trick your eyes into making it look almost like 3D. So it's that's kind of like what the expensive car companies are like, BMWs and Bentleys and things like that. They go for that deep look, and I think it'll be great if they can do that. The Fremont plant was notoriously old and dirty. I never bought a car out of that thing, but I do know that if I was redoing that plant, I would have been in there with sandblasting equipment to get rid of the dirt and junk. And sometimes that's what goes wrong. People don't do a good job at cleaning the old plant, and if you don't take off all of the muck that's associated with a paint department, like a paint shop, you don't get rid of all that, it'll always come back to bite you. So I think that's kind of like what's going on. They've got dirt there that probably is, who knows, 40 or 50 years old. Yeah.
So one part of the Tesla story I'm fascinated with is Autopilot and the way they're developing this self-driving software that sort of
Yeah.
gets better, and they have all the drivers training their system. I'm curious what your thoughts are on that and what you've seen from a hardware perspective. Because one thing Tesla's done an amazing job of is getting the hardware needed for the software down to a price point where they can build it into every car as a production
Yeah.
vehicle. That's a super unique thing that, until I know, I talked to Rivian and they say they're going to do it. I'd love to see you tear down a Rivian, by the way. And they're planning to have like twice as many sensors and cameras as a Tesla is, just to be able
Mhm.
to get the car to drive itself. But I'm curious, like, what your thoughts are on what Tesla's doing there.
Well, again, I did the ride and drive. That was actually condensed down to about, I don't know, 6 or 7 minutes. But we tried out a lot of different things. Like, everybody said, well, why didn't you do the stoplight thing? I did. I put it on and tried that out. Everything seems to work quite well. And in there, I talked about, in the olden days when I was a kid, a young kid. I grew up on a farm, and it was all around us were very, very old farms, like from the 1600s. This part of the world was basically settled by the French, and there was no British or colonialists that came out this far, really, because the French had everything. And I lived right around all these guys that had had their farms since, who knows, Louis the 16th or something like that. Very old. And these guys, they did not like to conform. They had tractors and combines and whatnot, but they also still had horses. And in the olden days, the old farmers, the really old farmers who didn't drive, I mean, this is a mind blowing, but they didn't drive. They didn't drive anything. They didn't drive. They only used the horse. And they would have a buckboard, and the guys would get in it, and they'd go to a party and get all looped up, come back, stagger into the into the buggy or the carriage or the buckboard, and they'd fall asleep on the front seat, and that's it. They'd slap the horse once, and then he'd walk home. He figured out how to get home. This is what we need. I need that right now. Okay, so I'm very big on ADAS and whatnot. So I tried out the car. I thought it worked remarkably well. I've tried out 4 or 5 different systems. This is a 3.0 system, whereas the other Teslas are like 2.5 or something along those, 2.5 or something like that. I thought it worked as well as could be, and it beeped at me and told me I had to go and touch the steering wheel again. But I mean, you could leave your hands off for a long time. Personally, I'd like to see them no hands. Actually, I don't know if you're aware of it, but one of the things we did at Munro was we developed an airplane. It's an airplane that was for SAT, Small Aircraft Transportation System, that NASA really wanted to have done to get rid of problems with highways. So in California, if you've ever had the misery of trying to go down Ventura Highway, which is a joke. I mean, you can be on there for 10 hours trying to go 10 feet. It's ridiculous, right? So a lot of that could disappear if we had VTOLs, vertical takeoff machines, or even conventional aircraft that anybody could fly, or better yet, you didn't have to fly. And so
Wow.
we developed an airplane. You just told it where to go. So you only landed at the small airports, and there's 10,000 of those, 10 or 15,000 of them running around, lots more than the big airports. You'd be in an airport, it would know where it was. You'd say, I want to go to Chicago. And it'd say, where in Chicago? You'd tell it, and then it would figure out what small airport to go to, and boom, you got there. And people think, oh, that's like science fiction. No, it isn't. We bid four of those planes. We retrofitted it with the kind of technology that we needed. We took off a bunch of senators and congressmen and flew them from basically Reagan, which is a much bigger airport than we wanted to, but they took off in Reagan and landed in Danville. I mean, a little dinky town, and nobody died. And that's all they did was they just said, basically, we want to go to Danville. And the planes took off. They landed. I've got videos on it. But unfortunately, it didn't work because we were ready to go into production in 2008. It's amazing. If I didn't
Wow.
have bad luck, I'd have no luck. But anyways, it failed because all the money dried up.
You know,
And
Elon has a design for an electric VTOL jet that he talks about. I made a couple of
yeah,
videos about it. Have you heard about that at all?
no, I haven't. But I'd really like to get involved in VTOL. I think that's what's really going to kill the car industry. It won't be the
Wow.
Cybertruck. It's going to be that, because I mean, everything is right there. It's all done. I don't understand why we don't have the flying cars. I mean, I grew up
And
with the
was yours
Jetsons.
electric? Sorry, I missed that part. Was the one you were designing electric?
Oh, we made it so that it would run on a Corvette engine, an inline six diesel engine, or an electric power plant. And the fuel cell, or sorry, the not the fuel cell, but the fuel area in the paradigm, you just drop that out and walk away with it, and then you'd put in it's in the wing box basically. You'd take that out, and then you'd put into the wing box batteries. And we were planning on nickel metal hydrate, but now we could triple the distance with basically I'd use Tesla's battery pack to. I'd put two of them in and call it a day.
Yeah, this is a
Yeah.
perfect segue to my next question because Elon has said that they would need an energy density of I think 400 watt hours per kilogram to start making it possible for the lithium, this new type of batteries to power it for short flights. I don't know if that sounds right to you.
Well, we were looking at 2 hours in the air, and I think I could probably get 2 hours out of because you're going quite a bit faster with an airplane. With a VTOL, that's different. It takes a lot of energy to lift it off the ground, and a lot more energy to bring it back down safely. So maybe that's what he's addressing. But for the paradigm, that was a 5-seater, and once you're up in the air, it's not a whole lot of power that you need in order to go around somewhere 150, 200 miles an hour. And you're going in a straight line, and you're not going to be stopping anywhere. I mean, there isn't any stop signs in the atmosphere. So that's where this thing had a lot of advantage. So
And so speaking of Tesla's batteries, have you looked what into they're doing? Have you looked much into what they're doing with Maxwell, and their battery investor day? And I'm big on this theory that they're going to unveil a next generation battery cell, which is even more energy dense and cheaper to produce. Have you looked much into that?
I've heard lots of tales, and it's hard to say which one is true and which one isn't. But I can tell you for sure that there's a bunch of guys that say it's going to be 50 millimeters in diameter, which kind of makes sense. So it'd be more than twice the diameter of what it is now. Nobody knows how long it's going to be, and it's probably going to be something that's going to be giving you a new chemistry. That new chemistry then would give you more power.
Sorry,
So
this is their new cell, like the dry battery electrode. You've been hearing rumors about that.
yeah, that's the solid state battery is the other one. There's a whole bunch of stories about what Maxwell was going to bring out and what
Yeah.
Tesla's going to do, but I haven't seen anything. Nobody has come along and said, "Hey, have a look at this." Um,
I mean, I'm sure they're trying to keep it super secret for now
I'm
until the
sure that
announcement.
yeah, I'm sure that there would be cement shoes. I think they used to call them cement shoes or cement galoshes for anybody that talked about it. That's for sure. They'd disappear and become fish food or that kind of a thing. I think that Tesla was supposed to have a battery day quite a while ago, but I think they didn't like what the results were, so they went back to the drawing board and they're going to come out with it. My big thing is I'm hoping that he's going to come out with a solid state battery. If that's because that's what Maxwell was touting, that they were going to come up with a solid state battery. And if that's the case, that's the game changer. That'll definitely change everything, because solid state batteries are they're like the utopia, the holy grail, if you like, of electric vehicles. Once that happens, everything will change. Everything. Yeah. And we've
Oh,
seen some, but not anything really big. So go ahead.
yeah. One thing I forgot to ask on the autopilot thing. Do you have an estimate of how much that suite is of like the computer and all these sensors? Like, how much cost does that add to the vehicle?
That's what we're working on right now. We're going to be actually, I have to sell reports soon, otherwise the bank will come and take this building. But I'm going to tell you right now, there's going to be some reports that are going to be specific, and they're going to be sold separately. You don't have to buy the whole thing. And one of them is going to be for the Octovalve and the heat pump and all that other stuff going together. And the other one is going to be for the ADAS system. That'll be a much deeper dive into the ADAS system for those people who are building those types of systems. But right now, I can't tell you. I don't know. We haven't
Gotcha.
finished yet, and it'll be probably the last thing, because the one thing I can tell you is the guy that's got the job is ripping his hair out, trying to figure out how to cost all these things and what they do and how they interact and things like that.
Yeah,
It's
because
not.
Tesla built their own chip from scratch, right? I mean,
No, yeah,
how unprecedented is it for them to have their own chip program? And they have another version of the chip. You said you drove hardware 3.0. They
yeah,
have a 4.0 in the works too that'll come out in a year or
right.
two. So how unprecedented is that Tesla's like, I call them almost computer on wheels, almost not a car because of the level
Yeah,
of electronics.
yeah, and quite frankly, that is basically the way it is right now. Almost every car, whether it's ICE or electric, is computers, lots of computers on wheels. Electronics takes up a huge amount of the cost. But I think that the only company that I know of that creates, or the only industry that I know of that creates their own chips, apart from the computer industry, is the Defense Department, the DoD. They create their own chips. And unfortunately, this is one of these areas where I get all testy and excited. We don't build any of them here, none. And that scares the daylights out of me. Now, I heard stories about the Tesla chip and how it's got billions of contact points and stuff like that. And they tried to get Texas Instrument to build it, and they couldn't, so it's gone where? China. We're falling behind that curve really quickly. We can come up with the ideas and whatnot, but we can't build them. And like I said right at the beginning of this show, manufacturing, if you don't manufacture, you die. You become a third world country. And we really have fallen behind the curve. And I put all of that blame on the East Coast universities that have this puerile idea that somehow all we have to do is just put a label on the front and call it good. That stuff doesn't work.
Yeah, it's
No,
like the
no.
MBAs are running the country, like running
Yeah,
it from an Excel spreadsheet. But that's why I love Elon Musk and what Tesla's doing. Like they're vertically integrated. Like that's super
yes,
new and different. And they brought that back. And specifically like what you're talking about, that casting part. where they have for the back of the Model Y, where they had like 70 pieces, they turned into two, soon to be one. How much is like with those sort of improvements? How much is Tesla pushing the envelope on the actual manufacturing level? Like, is that something that's never been done before, or is that like a breakthrough for automotive manufacturing?
No, there's lots of examples of big castings that were used. I mean, you've got Cadillac, you've got actually BMW's got a tremendous number of them. Audi has a whole car like that, on and on. But the thing is, to go from this to that is no big wow. But what's really a big wow is that material. We put our little handheld spectrometer on it, went click, and it came back, and it's not 350 aluminum. It's 350 with some kind of additive that our machine can't pick up. So the big thing with Tesla is they're developing their own materials. We saw the same thing on the housing for the motors. It doesn't fall into a general casting kind of technology. It's different. And then they use different aluminums than what we'd normally see for the types of applications that they're using them for. Usually use this kind, but they've got something similar, but it's not the same. They're developing their own alloys. That's what makes it different. When you develop your own alloys, you're basically excluding everyone else from the marketplace because somebody is making that aluminum for them. That's not something you find on the shelf. And the only other company that I know that did that was actually we analyzed and I don't want to say copied, but we did an airplane that was called the Republic Seabee. It was also an exoskeleton aircraft, and they developed their own aluminums so that they could spot weld them and they wouldn't rot. And the aluminum does not rot. And the FAA shut them down. The FAA shut them down because they said you can't use spot welds, so your airplane will fall apart in the air. The plane in back of me is like, I don't know, 75, 80 years old. Who knows? A long time ago. And guess what? Not one rotten weld, not one. But they wouldn't allow them to have that special aluminum. In auto industry, if you have something that's close, you call it, that's fine. But I think that when somebody comes along and says, oh, I don't have to heat treat, I don't have to bring it to a T6, I don't want to get into technical stuff, but I don't have to heat treat this aluminum to bring it to bring it to full strength. It's like that already. How do you do that? Well, I don't know how. And I took metrology for 3 years in high school and I don't know how many years in college. I wanted to be a metallurgist. And I can tell you for sure that I don't know how to make that happen. I don't know how to get the right space lattice, and without doing a heat treat. They're doing it. Okay, I want to know what that material is, so I'm going to chop off a chunk of it, and it'll go to the most accurate company that's out there. They take a little piece, they blast it and blast it to pieces, and they look at the colors, and that's how you tell what's inside. How many different colors there are and what those colors mean as far as alloys, and we'll find out what the special ingredient is. But
yeah, and that sounds like one of those benefits, like because they're so partnered with SpaceX and so closely linked with that, they're able to use like a lot of the R&D from SpaceX and bring that into Tesla. And I think that's where some of that materials expertise comes from. And I'm wondering if, the stainless steel Starship with the stainless steel Cybertruck, if that's going to be like, a really next generation sort of materials partnership between the two companies.
I really don't know, but I can tell you that a lot of what we also work on rockets, rockets and missiles and things that do go into space. And I do know that they use materials that we would never dream of using inside of the auto industry. But the aluminum that we're talking about here, I don't know anything about. There's no aluminum that I know of that has the ingredients that came up on our spectrometer.
Gotcha.
They're just not there. So the stainless steel, maybe it's the same deal. Maybe they've got the exact same sort of a scenario. But the U.S. made a stainless steel aircraft. It went very, very fast, and they made it out of stainless steel because the aluminum product was melting. So that's kind of like why they did it. And then we got into cryogenic systems that would allow us to cool the front of the aircraft, and that problem went away. So they went back to aluminum, but stainless steel has a lot of advantages.
Really cool. And so I'm curious why the autopilot and self-driving package is so important that you would sell that by itself. The other thing you mentioned is the Octovalve, which is that
Yeah.
really cool thing, and you guys posted that awesome picture of it. Why
Yeah.
is like this little heat pump heating and cooling system important enough to be its own report and such a big deal?
Well, first off, I unfortunately didn't get a chance to drive either car in a wintertime, real wintertime. But I know that the PTC heater, the little resistor heater that they had in before, really didn't warm up the cabin. People complained about that a lot. This one, with the idea of doing a short circuit. So what they're doing is they're short circuiting the flow path that goes through the heat pump, so that it heats up faster, and then it starts sending warmer coolant around to heat things up. I haven't heard of anybody doing that. We work on air conditioning systems and heat pumps and whatnot, and I've never heard of anybody doing a short circuit like that. And so I'm like, you were asking about, who else does these kinds of things. Well, the Porsche, it has a system like that, or the Porsche, or maybe it's the I-Pace. I'm not sure. It's either the Porsche or the Jaguar, but they have five ports. This one's got 8 ports. So I have one of my guys right now. His name's Al Steyer, and he's working on that right now, and he thinks he's got it all worked out, except for 2 ports that he can't figure out. And I think what's going to happen is he's going to find that there's some kind of a do loop kind of a deal there, where that's going to be where they have the short circuit, and where they have something that's going to contain that heat, so that when the heater finally, or from the heat pump finally, gets to a certain temperature, bingo, it's going to shoot, and it's going to get things warm quickly, very, very quickly. So those are the 2 things that a lot of folks are very, very interested in. The other one is the new induction motor, the new aluminum induction motor versus the copper one, because that's where the energy is. That's where things are going to happen. Where the rubber meets the road, I guess is what. So I'm gonna suggest that that's the other one that's probably going to have its own separate. Actually, the inverter converters, they are separate. So we do one that tells you this is approximately how much the inverter converter costs, and here you go. But then there's another inverter converter study that's totally different, and that one gives you basically block diagrams and whatnot that shows you how everything works and where it goes to, and on and on and on. It's much more detailed, and basically the only people that are going to want to see that are people who are designing those kinds of products. The other stuff is good for the engineers that'll be trying to figure things out, or the finance people that want to know what the costs are. But the big deal is going to be in those other separate reports. And like I said, we sell those all day long to the guys in Japan. They definitely, they need to move quickly. They do not want to lose part of their market share by sitting on their hands. So.
Gotcha. Okay, so my last question is kind of a moonshot crazy one, because I know it's tied into the Octovalve and heat pump, because another thing that Tesla builds into that system is like it cleans the air for you too. It's also filtering the air, like in the Model S and X, they have the bioweapon defense mode, like sort of hospital grade filter. And Elon was talking about that on the conference call. And then he's been tweeting about how he wants to design a home HVAC system that would be like a smart heating cooling system. Somehow I'm thinking tied into your home battery, so it would draw energy from your battery, not at peak times for the grid. So I'm curious, like, Do you have any ideas on this Elon, Tesla home HVAC system or what he's thinking of?
Well, I did not hear about that, but that is a ripe industry. We work in that industry quite often, and we make some, grandiose kinds of suggestions. And one of them is, why aren't you storing energy, and why aren't you doing this, and why aren't you doing that? And we put, I mean, this place, NASA calls Munro an innovation factory. When NASA was having problems, they came here and said, "Hey, can you think of something in this area?" And that's how we got that from Dr. Holmes. He was the one who gave us the name. We didn't pick that out of fresh air. And we try and do that with other customers, and that includes the HVAC industry. But they're all about cheap. I mean, when your focus is nothing but I want the cheapest possible thing that'll work, well, that knocks the daylights out of any kind of innovation. So we've talked to different HVAC companies about moving into using water storage. I mean, it's cheap, and you could use that to supplement your heating systems. We've talked to them about more efficient ways of doing the heat pump, so they'll actually work in a colder climate like we have in Detroit. On and on and on. And what we get back is, no, nobody's doing that. We don't want to be the first in the marketplace. That's a good indication that I'm talking to an MBA. We're not going to be first. We're going to be second and better dressed. And I don't know who invented that, but that is 100% bullshit. That is crapola. The guy that's first wins. Nobody gives a shit about who come in second. And a way to do that is think back to the Olympics. Tell me all the guys who came in second. Nobody. Okay? And the only guys that can remember who lost the World Series or whatever are guys who are aficionados. I can only tell you who won. And unfortunately in Detroit, no matter whether it's baseball, hockey, basketball, football, whatever, it's always no, we didn't win that. But I think that the guys that win come in first, and Tesla, Elon Musk has come in first in a lot of things that other people are. Oh no, we're going to hold back. We're going to hold back. Good, hold back. Yeah, do that.
So when the stock market values Tesla more than Ford and GM combined, is the stock market being, even though they produce 1/10 the amount of cars, is the stock market being crazy, or is that a pretty clear clue about where this is all headed? Like you were just saying, who's first?
Well, times are changing, and some people say that the dinosaurs were eliminated by a big meteor, but there was still life left over. I think that the dinosaurs disappeared because they didn't conform to the new way of doing business, or the new lifestyle that they needed to have, or couldn't conform to the change in the weather or whatever. And companies are the same way. They come and go. If they're rigid and stay put, I think I mentioned this on another show. I think that business is like a parade. And if you decide to sit down in the parade and the elephants are in back of you, they're going to come forward and run you over, and you're going to wind up being highway pizza. And that's what it does. I mean, that's how it works. The guys that sit around and wait to be second, they get their wish. And that may be what's going on. I don't know. But I will tell you one thing. I never had Tesla stock before, but I have people who advise me on what to do, and I just say, "Hey, look, do whatever you want." And now I own Tesla. I have Tesla stock, and it's doing
welcome to the family.
Well. Yeah, but I mean, I would have never guessed I was going to buy. I don't usually buy individual stocks. It's not
no way. That's huge news. Sandy Munro is long Tesla. That's huge.
Yeah, I bought it. I think it was like dirt. It was like $500 or something, $5 or $4. I can't remember. I don't pay attention to stocks. But when my guy said, "Well, Sandy, your Tesla stock is doing really well." What Tesla stock? Well, the stuff you got. Where's it at? And I think it was like because it was last week or whatever. and I was going to take some money out of my 401k because I don't know what's going to happen, but I buy gold too. And so I'm going to take some of that out, put it into gold bullion, and I was talking and whatnot, and I found out that my Tesla stock was up like almost $200, and I said, "Really? Wow, I should have bought more. Why didn't you buy more?"
So wait, why did you try and get fancy if you never buy stocks to buy Tesla? Like, why? What made you do it?
Well, I didn't do it. It was done for me, but I never bought individual stocks. I buy stocks. I tell people that I only bet on horses I'm riding. So my customers, the customers that I work with and whatnot, if I know that they're asking me to do this, that, and the next thing, and I assess what the future could be, then I'll buy that stock. I bet on the companies that I'm working with. I almost never go outside of that rule. But this time I sold some stuff, and there was money left over, so they just bought me some Tesla stock, and bingo, because he said it's ultra low. So okay, fine. And now it's up. I don't know what it is at now, but it's around $700 or so. It's
Almost
700.
800, yeah.
Really?
As we're recording this, almost, yeah.
Well, then I'm definitely up $200. So for sure. So I'm pretty happy about that. Yeah, you can see it all over my face. But I don't have that many. I've only got a small amount. And the only reason I found out about it was because I was saying, well, why don't you just gather up all the stuff that I've got laying around in different things and, scrape it together, and I'll take that money to buy gold. And he went through, and there was the Tesla stuff, and I said, oh, okay, well, all right, don't sell that. And so that's where it's going to stay, right there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to join the show, Sandy. This is really interesting, and always a pleasure to talk to you. I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks so much for having me on. Yep.
And where can everyone find your, because you're a YouTuber now, you guys have put up a new website. Where can everyone find your stuff?
Yeah, it's Munro Live, so MUNRO Live.com. So if you pop that in, you'll be able to have a look, and everything will be hunky-dunky. And there's stuff that you can buy. Like if you wanted the bat that I went through the window with, that's for sale. There's all kinds of stuff for sale. So we need the money.
Yeah,
so
priceless collector's items.
Exactly right. All signed too. Yep.
All right, well, thanks, Sandy. Have a good one.
Okay, all righty. You too. Bye. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.